Police respond to 3-year-old's 911 call and make a shocking discovery at his home. The call came in just after midnight. The 911 dispatcher, accustomed to handling emergencies ranging from burglaries to domestic disputes, hesitated for a moment when she heard the voice on the other end. It was small, almost hesitant, barely above a whisper. "Hello? Mommy won't wake up." Her fingers tensed over the keyboard. Child callers were always the hardest. Keeping her voice calm, she asked the boy his name. "Ethan?" The name came out in a sniffle, followed by soft breathing. He sounded young, 3, maybe 4. The dispatcher's stomach tightened. "Ethan, sweetheart, is there someone else home with you?" A long pause. Then, in a voice so low she almost didn't catch it, he murmured, "He's watching me." The hair on the back of her neck stood up. "Who's watching you, Ethan?" Another pause, then a slight shuffle. "The man in the dark." The dispatcher didn't waste another second. She traced the call to a small house on the outskirts of town and immediately dispatched officers. But as she tried to keep Ethan talking, the lines suddenly cut to static. And then, just before the call dropped, she heard a single, chilling whisper. "He knows I called you." Officers Mitchell and Carter arrived at the house within minutes. It was an older, single-story home, the kind that had seen better days. The porch light flickered weakly, barely illuminating the yard, and the front door was slightly ajar. The two officers exchanged a glance before stepping inside. The house smelled stale, like dust and something faintly metallic. A few children's toys were scattered across the living room floor, and a small TV flickered with static in the corner. "Police?" Mitchell called out. "Ethan? Are you here?" No response. They moved cautiously down the hallway, checking each room. The kitchen was empty, the bathroom door hung open, exposing a clawfoot tub filled with murky water. But it was the master bedroom that made them stop cold. A woman lay motionless on the bed. Her skin was pale, lips slightly parted, eyes open but unfocused. No visible wounds. No blood. Just stillness. Carter leaned in to check for a pulse, but he already knew. The woman, presumably Ethan's mother, was dead. Then came a noise from down the hall. A tiny, shuffling sound, like small feet on hardwood. They turned toward the last door. The child's bedroom. Mitchell went first, pushing the door open with a creak. The room was dimly lit by a glowing nightlight in the shape of a crescent moon. And there, in the middle of the room, stood Ethan. He was small, barely reaching their waists, his blonde curls messy from sleep. He clutched a stuffed rabbit tightly to his chest, his tiny hands gripping the fabric like a lifeline. "Ethan?" Carter knelt to his level. "Hey, buddy. We're here to help." The boy's eyes flickered to him, wide and unblinking. Then, slowly, he lifted a small hand and pointed to the closet. Mitchell followed the boy's gaze. The closet door was open just a crack. Enough to see inside. Enough to see that it was empty. At least, it should have been. Then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The clothes inside the closet weren't hanging straight. They were slightly pushed forward, as if something was behind them. Hiding. Waiting. Carter stood, one hand on his holster. "Is someone in there?" Silence. Mitchell reached forward, heart hammering, and yanked the closet door open. Nothing. Just empty hangers and a few scattered shoes. Then Ethan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "You didn't look high enough." Mitchell barely had time to process the words before a cold breath skimmed the back of his neck. A shadow shifted above them. And then, the room went dark. Police respond to 3-year-old's 911 call and make a shocking discovery at his home. Part 2. Darkness swallowed the room. For a split second, there was only silence, thick, suffocating, absolute. Then came the whisper. Low. Raspy. Right above them. "He sees you too." Mitchell barely had time to react before something heavy crashed down from the ceiling. The air shifted violently as a shadowy mass lunged past them, knocking Carter off balance. His flashlight tumbled to the floor, spinning wildly, casting chaotic beams of light across the room. Mitchell fumbled for his weapon, heart pounding. The beam of his flashlight caught something, a fleeting glimpse of a twisted, skeletal figure darting into the hallway. Long, gnarled fingers scraped against the wooden walls as it moved with unnatural speed. Carter cursed, scrambling to his feet. "What the hell was that?" Ethan whimpered, clutching his stuffed rabbit tighter. "He doesn't like the light," he whispered. Mitchell's mind raced. This wasn't just a home invasion. This was something else. Something wrong. "Ethan, we need to get out of here," Mitchell said, scooping the boy into his arms.
"Now."
Carter covered them as they moved toward the hallway, gun raised. But as soon as they stepped outside the bedroom, the temperature dropped. A deep, bone-chilling cold seeped into their skin, and the house itself seemed to groan. Then came the sound, a rhythmic, hollow tapping. From down the hall, the officers stopped, bodies tense. The tapping grew louder, uneven, erratic, like nails dragging across wood. It was coming from the master bedroom, the room where Ethan's mother lay dead. A sharp thud made Mitchell's blood run cold. The bed frame creaked. Then the whispering started. "He's still hungry." The voice wasn't Ethan's. It wasn't even human. Mitchell tightened his grip on Ethan, stepping backward. The dim light from the hallway flickered, casting twisted shadows against the walls. Then, in the doorway of the master bedroom, something moved. A shape, tall, thin, grotesquely elongated. Its head jerked unnaturally, twitching as though it were adjusting to the light. And its eyes, deep, empty sockets, locked onto them. Mitchell had seen a lot in his years as an officer, but nothing like this. Carter didn't hesitate. He fired. The gunshot shattered the silence, echoing through the house. But the thing didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. Instead, it laughed. A deep, guttural noise that sent a jolt of raw terror through them. Then, with impossible speed, it lunged. Mitchell turned and ran, clutching Ethan as Carter fired again. Bullets meant nothing to this thing. They needed to get out.
Now.
The front door was just ahead, inches away. Then something slammed into them. Mitchell hit the ground hard. The breath knocked from his lungs. Ethan tumbled from his arms, rolling across the floor. Carter shouted his name, but the voice was distant, distorted. The thing was on top of him. Cold fingers gripped his throat. A face loomed above, stretched, contorted, wrong. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, revealing rows of jagged, needle-like teeth. Mitchell struggled, gasping, but the weight of the creature was crushing him. The edges of his vision blurred. Then Ethan screamed. A high-pitched, ear-splitting wail. The thing recoiled instantly, screeching as if in agony. Its body convulsed, limbs twisting as if they were being wrenched apart. Mitchell didn't waste time. He grabbed Ethan and bolted for the door. Carter was already outside, his gun still raised. They didn't stop running until they reached the patrol car. Mitchell threw open the door, shoved Ethan inside, and locked the doors. Carter jumped into the driver's seat, slamming on the gas. The house shrank in the rearview mirror. But just before they turned the corner, Ethan looked back. His tiny fingers pressed against the window. And in the glow of the flickering porch light, the thing stood in the doorway, watching, smiling. It didn't follow. It didn't need to. Because Ethan was still whispering, "He'll find me again." Police respond to 3-year-old's 911 call and make a shocking discovery at his home. Part 3. The ride back to the station was tense, the air inside the patrol car thick with unspoken fear. Ethan sat curled in the back seat, his small fingers clutching his stuffed rabbit so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His eyes, wide, unblinking, stared out the window, watching the darkness rush past. Mitchell and Carter exchanged glances. Neither had spoken since they left the house. What could they say? How could they explain what had just happened? The thing in the house, it wasn't human. It wasn't possible. Mitchell's grip on the wheel tightened. "We need to call this in." Carter let out a shaky breath. "And tell them what? Exactly? That a damn shadow tried to kill us? That bullets did nothing? That..." He gestured to the back seat, lowering his voice. A 3-year-old somehow scared it off. Ethan stirred at the mention of his name, his small voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. He's not scared of you. Mitchell glanced at him through the rearview mirror. Who isn't, kid? Ethan hesitated, then whispered, "The man in the dark." A chill ran down Mitchell's spine. Carter sighed and rubbed a hand down his face. "Kid, what is that thing? What does it want?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He shifted in his seat, lowering his gaze to his stuffed rabbit. "He was Mommy's friend first," he murmured. "She talked to him when she was sad. He made her better." Mitchell's stomach twisted. "Made her better?" Ethan nodded. "But then she got sick, and he said he could fix her. She just had to let him in." Mitchell felt cold. Let him in where, Ethan's? The boy's lip trembled. Inside. A shiver crept down Carter's spine. Jesus Christ. Ethan's hands clenched around his rabbit. She got worse. She stopped eating. Stopped playing with me. He hesitated. She didn't like the light anymore. Mitchell swallowed hard. And then what happened? Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. She let him stay. The car suddenly lurched. The headlights flickered, the dashboard lights sputtering. Mitchell cursed, gripping the wheel as the car veered to the side. Then the engine died. Silence. The road ahead was pitch black, the only sound their heavy breathing. Carter tried the radio. Nothing but static. Mitchell's pulse pounded in his ears. "We need to move. Now." Carter nodded, reaching for his gun. But then Ethan whimpered. Mitchell turned and froze. The back seat was empty. Ethan was gone. The car doors had never opened. The windows were still locked. But the boy was gone. Mitchell and Carter scrambled out of the vehicle, flashlights cutting through the darkness. They were in the middle of nowhere, just an empty stretch of road, surrounded by dense trees. Then Carter's flashlight landed on something. Small footprints, leading into the woods. Mitchell's stomach twisted. "No way in hell we're splitting up," he muttered. Carter nodded, and together, they followed the tracks. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The wind had died, the forest unnervingly still. Even the insects had fallen silent. Then, up ahead, a small figure. Ethan stood motionless in the clearing, his back to them. Mitchell exhaled in relief. "Ethan, stay right there, buddy. We're coming to get you." The boy didn't move. Didn't even acknowledge them. Mitchell stepped closer. "Ethan's?" Then, ever so slowly, the boy turned his head. Just his head. Too far. His neck twisted at an unnatural angle, bones cracking, until his face was looking at them, upside down. And then he smiled. Not a child's smile. A jagged, knowing grin that stretched too wide. Then he spoke. "I told you. He found me." A low, guttural growl rumbled through the trees. Shadows slithered across the ground, moving toward them. The darkness around them, it was alive. Mitchell grabbed Carter's arm. "Run." They turned and bolted back toward the car. The shadows chased them, tendrils reaching, twisting, whispering. "Stay. Stay with us." Mitchell barely made it to the car before slamming the door shut. Carter jumped into the driver's seat, turning the key frantically. The engine roared to life. The headlights flared. And for a split second, Ethan stood in the middle of the road, watching, smiling. Then, as the headlights flickered, he was gone. The road ahead stretched empty. Carter floored the gas. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them would speak about it again. But that night, long after Mitchell lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling, he heard it. The faintest tap on his bedroom door. And a whisper. "He's still hungry."